We're like, where are we going? Like, what did we sign? We both kind of looked at each other and we're like, where are we going? Like, what is this? And we ended up in a couple very magical places. And one of those places was this rope bridge.
Small businesses are at the heart of the U.S. economy. Here at Nurture Small Business Podcast, we're dedicated to seeing our small business owners succeed. I am your host, Denise Cagan, president of DCA Virtual Business Support. If you like what you hear on today's podcast, please share it. You have my gratitude for doing so.
Today's guest is a lifelong learner, soaking in the wonders of the world from Northern Ireland, Bermuda, Vienna, London, Jackson Hole, Kennebunkport, and Las Vegas. That's right. Not all learning comes from a classroom. I'm chatting today with Meg Seitz, who is the founder and CEO of Shop, a communications agency that focuses on a human and holistic approach to branding, marketing, and communications. Welcome to the show, Meg.
Hi, Denise. I'm happy to be here.
I am so excited. So you totally impressed me. You asked me, were we going to do video? And I was like, yeah, we usually do a clip of the video to promote it. And you're like, oh, I'm not camera ready. So in probably 60 seconds, you were camera ready. I just loved it. You switched, you got your blazer, you changed, position. So you had a different background and applied makeup. And I was like, wow, that's impressive. So are you always that efficient?
No, I'm not. I feel like I have learned how to get that efficient when it comes to being camera ready in the last couple of years. But I have to say, though, I've had to do that a couple of times for client meetings. You were a special case, though, because I did it in front of you, which I typically don't do. But I was literally like, let me take off my big coat. Let me put on my blazer. And you got to see the makeup while I did it in the camera. So you get a special reward for being the recipient of that experience.
Very cool. Again, very, very effective, very efficient.
Thank you.
I think you should teach a class on that, actually.
I think it could be very helpful for a lot of people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I'm going to jump back to the introduction that I did. Yeah. I saw on your bio a bridge in Northern Ireland, and I had to go look it up. I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce it. I'm going to let you tell us the name, but tell me about your visit there.
Oh my gosh. Yes. It is the Carrick Reedy Bridge. And it is in Northern Ireland, and if to kind of position yourself in the scheme of Northern Ireland, when you cross the bridge, you are looking across to Scotland. Not very well, but just to orient people map-wise. So that was a funny experience. My sister and I went to Ireland in 2019. And we flew to Dublin. We did a tour of kind of Ireland, went over to Galway, did your traditional Irish stops. And then we wanted to spend a day in Northern Ireland. So we took the train from Dublin to Belfast. And then we got on a tour bus. And to be completely honest, we had bought the experience, the entire trip through a travel agent, a service. And so we really trusted everything that was on the list. And we get on the bus there in Belfast and we start driving. And we're like, where are we going? Like, what did we sign? We both kind of looked at each other and we're like, where are we going? Like, what is this? And we ended up in a couple very magical places. And one of those places was this rope bridge, which, if you're familiar with the landscape of Ireland, or if you've ever seen any pictures of the cliffs of Moher, very steep cliffs that drop into the ocean. And so this rope bridge is one of those experiences that goes from the mainland. So picture this kind of rocky drop to another rock that's in the slightly off the coast. And like you'd expect from a rope bridge, pretty precarious, it's swinging, you have a lot of weight on it. There are planks, but in between planks, you have a direct view down into the ocean.
And I read that it was 30, was it 20 meters or something, which is like 60 feet.
Yeah.
Nice. I was like,
Yeah.
okay, that's not a small drop.
It's not a small drop. And it's one of those things too, where it's a tourist attraction. So there's a line to do it. And there's a line on the bridge too. So you get probably like halfway out onto the bridge and you have to stop just because of human traffic. And you're like, oh my gosh, if this plank gives
So they're going
out,
in both directions?
yeah, it goes, yeah,
God.
you take the, yeah. Oh yeah. And it was one of these experiences where my sister and I were like halfway out onto the bridge and we were like, where are we? How did we get here? Like we got on this bus to go on this trip and it was really good proof that there are some days you just never know where you're going to end up and what you're going to be asked to do. But we are both people individually and as sisters who travel a lot, we're both people that like to say yes. And so when there's the rope bridge and you're like, do you do it or do you not? Like we're 99% of the time going to say yes. And so that was a really great example of that.
I'm less adventuresome now, but I probably still would have done that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you're in such a quiet and I mean, I want to say random part of the world that you're like, when am I going to get back here? Like, I'm like, I have to do it. So it's been an interesting thing since then because I've only run into a handful of people who have who A, know the bridge and B, have done it. And chances are, if you've walked the bridge, you've also done this other magical part of Ireland, which is called the Giant's Causeway, which is again, Northern Ireland, that same part of the world, and just beautiful. And then, of course, situated in the middle of these is Bushmills. So we also toured Bushmills on that same tour, which is, I feel like that was like the classic Irish day.
Absolutely. That sounds like a wonderful day. So
yeah.
You said something about, you have this yes mentality. Do you apply that to your work also?
I do. And it gets me in trouble a lot.
How so?
Yeah. When you've said yes too many times and it's like, 11 o'clock at night and you're like, I said yes too many times and I have something due tomorrow and tomorrow. I tend to be someone who says yes quickly. I've always been like that. Like I remember even as a kid in school, if there was a group project and we needed a team leader, it was like, yes, I'll do it. I've always been one of the first to say yes. I think that's how I got into this adventure that is business ownership, is that I said yes. And I think that's one of the components about how our team works as well, is that, we do say yes, and it sometimes gets me in trouble and overscheduled. Your team knows very well that I sometimes overschedule myself, oftentimes overschedule myself. But I think there's also a thing about saying yes that is reassuring to a client, because there's nothing worse than a client coming to you with an idea or like what about this? And you say no. And so when somebody comes to us, I want them to feel like they have a partner in the yes. They have a partner in the possibility and the like, let's try it. And that hopefulness that is a lot of people and creativity and ideas. So I think in some senses, yes has to be monitored when it comes to your schedule. But when it comes to creativity and ideas, I will always be the one, I will always be the cheerleader who says yes.
So my company also has somewhat similar philosophy, and we start bringing our team members up very early on. Don't tell clients no. Okay. Let's just not tell them no. Even if it's something legitimately we don't do. Okay. Let's find a solution, because the solution might be connecting you to someone else I know. And that's okay too. So, we want to try to say, yes, we'll find a solution and figure out where that solution will come from. So I really like that. I want to talk a little bit about the humanizing, holistic approach to your work. But before I do, Talk Shop, it is not capitalized. Why?
That is that is an FAQ, Denise. Frequently asked question. I So my branding background is I worked for a number of years for a company called Lululemon, which is athletic apparel. And if you pay attention, the Lululemon logo is all lowercase. And so I fell in love with the way lowercase letters work and look at that point in my career. I really like the fact that like everything is one line. There's not one letter that's bigger or smaller than the other. And then on a very like strange level, I just like the way a lowercase t looks versus an uppercase t. So I like the motion of the T, like the cross in the middle for two T's in Toth. So I just like the way that they look similar. So I think it's a shout out to my previous working experience, but then it's also on another level the idea that I get to choose what it looks like, and I like the lowercase all across. It throws a lot of people off though, and it actually ends up being a very interesting test for potential clients of who's really bothered by it. Like if you're really bothered by that, which we've had people come to us who've been very bothered by that, I'm like, you might not be for us, because you have to be willing to think a little bit outside the box and see things a little bit differently to know that it does not always have to be uppers and lowers. Like it can be whatever you want it to be. So people who are bothered by it, there is a little bit of a red flag. But it ends up being a funny thing because we use lowercase letters a lot across the website, across our branding and marketing. And so it's interesting who picks up on it.
I can see that. That makes sense. I sent an article out to my team. I'm like, hey guys, tell me what you think about this. And I was really trying to get to the messaging on it. But the one person like focused in on they're missing periods at the end and this and that. And I wouldn't trust them. I was like, but what about the message? They're saying?
Yeah, it actually ends up being a really interesting practice in the way brains work, because there are some people that will go right for the details, like the punctuation, the capitalization, right for the details. And then there are some who look at the bigger picture. So you can really figure out somebody so quickly when you do that, because, different brains and eyes go to different things.
I actually had to train myself to look a little bit more holistically. Because I was the person who would focus in like, wow, they've misspelled that. Their grammar is incorrect. I would totally focus on that. And I had to train myself to think differently so I could see the message and experience whatever it was that, I was looking at and reading. So interesting that you say that.
I am the opposite because it comes very naturally to me. I'm a visionary person. Like I'm literally like, get on the boat, come with me, we're going somewhere. And we'll work out the details. I like the big picture. I like thinking about it very holistically. I have had to train my brain to look at the details, which is incredibly important to the work we do in communications. And so what I know is because my brain does not naturally look for the tactical side of it or the small details, I need to make sure there's someone on our team who can balance me out.
We have editors on our team for that reason, because often our creative people don't always see the especially with words. They'll see the details in an image all day long, but not always with words. So incredible. Yeah. You and I spoke before, and we talked about you published a book last year, right? Your first book. Tell me about it.
Yeah, so I published my first book in November of 2023. It is called You Are Something New, and it is 10 chapters, which are 10 stories from my career, my working life over the last 20 years. And they are life stories that I have built into how I do business. So the example of the bridge walk, I don't talk about that in the book, but that's a perfect example of the fact that we were on this trip. If I were writing this as like the 11th chapter, it's, we had this experience where we just showed up and got on the bus and trusted the journey and kept saying yes. And so my call in that situation to businesses and organizations would be, how often are you letting go and getting on the bus and being willing to say yes? So you picture that experience across 10 chapters and across 20 years of working. And that's what every chapter is a story from my life, from work, from travel, from, funny experiences from childhood. Even I throw in some of those, how they relate to how I started to shape my career, and then how they relate to how I do business. And this whole idea that I really think that you, me, whomever it is, you are something new every single day. And it's because of the lessons that are unfolding in your life and the nuances of your life. It's just a question of whether you're paying attention or not. And I think that's where we are today, is that not a lot of people are paying attention to those moments, and they get 6 months, 12 months, years down the road, and they're like, why is nothing changing? And it's like, well, maybe you're not paying attention to how things are unfolding in your own world.
Yeah, they're focused sometimes more on the destination versus, the journey, as the saying goes.
Yeah. And I think there's a misconception that you need to go to grad school, or you need to move across the country, or quit your job and become an entrepreneur. You need these like really big milestones to have these aha moments. And you're like, I actually sometimes get the best aha moments at a red light, watching somebody else drive through the red light. Then I'm like, I just figured out something about my own life, and I want to make sure that, how do we take those lessons and apply them to life and work and business and family?
Absolutely. I have talked to my team members about goals, and I have one team member in particular that has really struggled with coming up with some goals to share with me. Mm-hmm. And when I finally dug into it, it was exactly what you said. She felt like it needed to be this big, elaborate thing. And I was like, no. I mean, if your goal is to lose 20 pounds, the baby steps along the way, like getting out and walking in the neighborhood, or, jogging, doing the couch to 5K, whatever that program is.
Yeah.
Doing those little things, those are the goals, and then, there's a bigger goal at the end of it, but all those little things count. And all of a sudden it's like, you could see this light bulb come on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, goals are scary because you think it's got to be this big thing. And then you go down the road of like, well, what if I don't hit it? What if I don't get there? You're like, yeah, but what about like all the lessons learned along the way? Those are each their own treasures if you choose to see them like that.
And even if you don't hit the goal, you're right. It's you have that experience, and you have the lessons, the things that you can. I tell Dee this. I was like, you have lemons? Make limoncello cake. I don't do lemonade. We do limoncello cake.
That is such a better alternative.
It is.
I would much rather have a slice of that than a cup of lemonade. So you bring up Dee. So this is some love for you and your team. The book never would have happened. The book never would have happened without Dee. To be honest, she planted the seed. She and Escher, who is also on our team, from your team, we consider them members of our team. Dee and Escher had been uploading blog posts to my website for months. And at one point, Dee stopped and she said, I read your blog posts every time we upload them. And I think these would be great in a book. And it's not that I blew it off per se. I was just like, yeah, I've kind of thought about it for 20 years, but I've never done it. And she's like, well, actually, I have someone you should talk to. You should talk to them. So she put me in contact with someone in PR who has a publishing house, a hybrid publishing house. And so it was Dee who did something very special, which is plant the seed, and she got the ball rolling, which a lot of people plant seeds, but not a lot of people plant the seed and then take the first action step for you, which is what she did.
She gets all sorts of kudos and shout outs for that. And that is why Dee has moved up to be my operations manager, because of that type of insightfulness. So thank you for the shout out. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, it created this I mean, ironically, not to be cheesy, but it created something new for me, and it got me off the dime. And I would not have thought about it seriously had she not made those connections. So you just never know what happens.
You sure don't. So I promised you that we were going to talk a little bit about humanizing communication, because that is your specialty. You are a communications company. And let's start with this burgeoning industry of AI. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, this is another frequently asked question we get is, and honestly, it started last year when somebody came to me in a panic. I saw her in person. She came to me in a panic and she was like, what are you going to do? Almost like grabbing my shoulders. Like, what are you going to do about ChatGPT? It's going to take your job. And I was like, okay, this is so much drama. And let me tell you why I'm not worried. And over the course of the last year that it's become popular, this has become even more important, because I think at first we thought, to her point, we thought AI and ChatGPT, when it comes to writing and copywriting, was going to be the solution. Like, this is going to replace a job. It's the answer. And I think over the last year, we've come to understand that it's a tool to help you. And so I think just shifting the conversation from this is the answer, this is the solution, to this is a tool to help you do your job better or faster, it changes our approach to it. And I say that because what we've come to experience in ChatGPT is that it gives you a really great, like, C+ or B- paper. Like, if you, I'm a former high school teacher, so I know what a second semester high school senior, I know the quality of work. And you're going for a C+, you're going for a B- because you've got one foot out the door. And it'll give you that. It checks all the boxes. Mm-hmm. I think where people are getting it wrong is that it can't be as simple, put it into ChatGPT and copy and paste. You still need a human brain. You need human ingenuity to go in and polish and refine it, because a lot of times we connect with communications and we connect with copy because we hear someone's voice in the copy. We can read their voice, we can hear it. It has a flow to it that makes sense. And it's aligning with the brand too. I mean, that's the other thing, is the robots don't know your brand. You know, they don't know how you've been communicating the last 10 years or 15 years. They have no idea. And so I think it will always take a human at that level to polish and refine it before it goes out. So I think that's one level of it. The second level, which concerns me as a writer, as someone who's been writing in some way or another, or editing writing for a long time, I do get concerned about copyright, because the robots will just scan the internet and you don't know what they're scanning. They could scan some Wikipedia page that, somebody edited while, when they weren't paying attention or when they were just trying to goof off. Or it could also scan one of your competitors' websites, which is what we've seen happen, is that one client was like, this sounds familiar. And they ended up finding out that the robots had scanned and had yanked things from their competition. And so I'm worried about it from a copywriting perspective, because then, anything's fair game, and we work really hard on our writing and we want credit for it. And just to have somebody come in and yank things without us even knowing is a dangerous game.
I read an article recently about how AI's behavior is that the businesses are being held responsible. Like, for somebody somehow tricked a chatbot into giving them a vehicle for $1. It was a brand new vehicle. So, like, figure $20,000. And the dealership was held liable for it. Mm-hmm. And then somebody else did something with, they got some misinformation about an airline's ticket and discounts, and there were no discounts running. And the company was liable for the discounts that the AI said it would have. So I think there are definitely ways you can apply it in your business and
Yeah.
use it to streamline things. For
Hmm.
instance, in our hiring process, we use just basic, and it's basic thought logic. It's not specifically AI, but we have certain questions that, where do you reside? And if you're not in a state where we're registered to hire, you
Hmm.
know, then it knocks them out of the eligibility. So I think there's some really logical things that you can use it for, but
Hmm.
I know in HR, people are talking about, how much do you want to use it? Because they're, in some cases using it to assess like video interviews that are a question posed that's not a person question posed, and then somebody responds to it. I
Yeah.
wouldn't feel comfortable with that.
Yeah. 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 And, in our world, I'm not like, I want people to use it. Like, telling people not to use it is probably going to drive people to it more. So, what I want to say is, like, I want you to use it at the right point in the process. So, a lot of, especially in our work, a lot of people bring us in because they're afraid of the blank page. Like, we all know the blank Word doc with the blinking cursor, and you're like, I don't even know where to start. And that it's still scary. It was scary in seventh grade and it's scary now. So I think what it's good for is helping you get started. Like, it helps you get through the blank page. It'll help you with a first draft. It'll help you get something there. And it's then you just have to shift your brain power at that point to be, I need to edit, I need to refine, I need to polish, but it'll get you the rough draft. So I think if you go into it with the right intent, you're going to be happier with the result.
I agree. I think right now using it that way can save a little bit of time, but I don't think it saves as much time as some people think it does.
Yeah, I like, my concern is the people who use it and then copy and paste. And we had a client do that for like one of those Inc. 500 or Inc. One of those business awards. They were in a rush to submit it, put it into Chat GPT, copied and pasted it, and then somebody right before it was like, let's send it, was like, wait a minute, this does not sound good. So I think you have to be really cognizant of that, and you've got to make sure that you're not going to copy and paste.
Oh, I agree. I agree wholeheartedly. Do you have a preference on Chat GPT, Gemini? Isn't Gemini what used to be Bard?
Yeah, I think
Jasper?
the only one I have tried Jasper and ChatGPT. ChatGPT is the one we've been using when we've needed it for like a small project, or if we're just testing something. Like, a lot of times, it's like, let's just put it in there and see what happens. Just as research for us.
I tried Jasper. I found that one a little bit hard to navigate.
Yeah, that one was not, and I felt like it was just not complicated per se, but it just felt like a lot of bells and whistles. And I was like, let me just put this in here, put it into ChatGPT. Like, that interface just looks so much simpler to me.
It is.
It
It
just makes,
absolutely is.
yeah, it's one less thing to worry about. And that's just an easier platform for me.
Absolutely. So, Meg, what should I have asked you that I didn't ask you?
Oh my gosh, what a good question. Um, I love to talk about where I grew up.
Tell me.
I had a very unique childhood in the sense that we grew up all over the country. And that's because my parents, who are both from Pittsburgh, my parents grew up with their homes behind each other, like their backyards backed into each other for the majority of their childhood. And their commitment to our family as they were starting a family was, if a job came up, my dad was going to take it. He was in sales and marketing, at that point in time. Of course, this is way before the pandemic. You moved for sales and marketing roles and promotions and changes. And so because of that, my sister and I grew up all over the country. So we've lived in Philadelphia a couple of times. We've lived outside New York City on Long Island. We've lived in Chicago. We've lived in outside Dallas and Plano, Texas. And then I did high school in Pittsburgh. So as a child, I was very bothered by it because you're like, I don't want to move all the time. Like I got really tired of being the new kid. But what I've come to understand is it set me up really well to be an adult. And the idea that things change and people change. And, we're fortunate to know people our whole lives and to have that experience. But at the same time, if you're used to change, like you get more comfortable with it as an adult.
I was just going to say it teaches you resilience. And,
Yeah.
a lot of our young people today are experiencing anxiety because they aren't willing to do the change. And you had, not through your own choice necessarily, but you had this life that you lived as a child that, change was part of it. So you had to deal with whatever anxieties and came up with that.
Yeah. Yeah. And you just kind of dealt with it. Like when you're the new kid and they're introducing you again in front of the class, you're like, well, here we go again. But it's prepared me. I mean, it certainly prepared me for change through my adult life, but also for business ownership too, of every year has to look different in your business. Like this year, we're in our 9th year. If I had said, what's the 9th year going to look like in my first year, I never would have predicted it. Like every year is different. Every season is different. And I think going into it with that assumption is going to make you more comfortable and happier in the long run.
And so you are currently enrolled in the 10KSB program, the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Businesses. Tell us about that a little bit.
Yes. What a good segue in talking about change. Yes. So again, I'm part of this program, Denise, because Dee recommended it. She had said, she had just like dropped it one day in one of our weekly calls, and she had mentioned you did it. And so I did some research and I did an informational call, and I applied last year, got into the program. It started in February of this year, and it's an incredible program. Not only in the resources from Goldman Sachs and Babson, who's the kind of the sponsor, the academic sponsor, but also just the business owners who are part of it. My class has 130 business owners, and then 30 in our session, 35 in our group session. And I think what's been the most comforting is that so many times as a business owner, you feel like you can have a team, but you're still kind of in a silo. You're like, at the end of the day, it's the first thing I think about. It's the last thing I think about. And you're not sure. You're like, is this the right decision? Am I in the right, am I right? That's normally how I phrase it to myself. And I think what's been reassuring through the program is that a lot of the questions I ask myself, other business owners are asking themselves. So it's helped me to feel not so alone in the idea of business ownership, and that what I'm experiencing is very normal and very, I don't want to say predictable, but we're progressing the way other businesses are progressing, which is reassuring. But I think it's been an incredibly difficult program, in the best way possible. Challenging is maybe the better word for it. And at the same time, too, it's really opened my eyes to this whole other side of business ownership.
Interesting that you talk about the silo and the isolation, because I have another guest, probably 2 episodes after you, that's coming on, a mental health professional that is talking about isolation and siloization for business owners, because you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah. And I was not prepared for that. Like I said, we've been around for 9 years. I was the only one working in the business for the first 4 years. And at that point, it was me in front of the computer. It was me in front of a client. You're not really sure where you're going. It's like being in the car with no map, and you need to get somewhere, but you're not sure how. And I think once we started adding team members, that collaborative nature changed, but the business ownership piece, some of the questions I was asking myself, those got harder, and you're in a silo by yourself. So I think the camaraderie among business owners over the last couple of years for me has changed. And this program in particular has really created this place where I can ask questions and not feel like you're crazy or you're insecure or weak or whatever it is. But these people get it.
Absolutely. You have been a fantastic guest today. Before we sign off, how can our listeners find you?
Yeah, I would love, if you've heard this podcast, I would love to hear from you. Probably the best place for me, the social channel I spend the most time on, or social platform, is LinkedIn. So please connect on LinkedIn. And then our company website is TOTHshop, TOTH shop.com. And then my email address is probably another great way. So if you want to provide that in the show notes, that would be great. I'd love just to say hi and that you've listened to this episode would be great.
Absolutely. I'll put the LinkedIn as well as your website and your email in the show notes.
Fantastic.
Meg, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me, Denise.
Thank you for joining me for today's Nurture Small Business podcast, where the focus is on business growth through technology, leadership, and people strategies. Do you have an idea for a podcast or feedback you'd like to share with me? Send me a note through my website at dcavirtual.com/contact.